Decent sunny spells developing through London, East Anglia and the southeast, and with the breeze coming up from the south, temperatures could reach 20 to 22 Celsius. Further west, it's mild, yes, but it's gloomy, and those outbreaks of rain are continuing throughout much of the day. They'll be on and off, but they will be heavy at times. Certainly a soggy end of the day for much of Western England and Wales, Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Eventually that system does clear through. Brighter skies follow for Thursday with 1 or 2 showers, and it's also going to feel a little fresher as temperatures start to dip away.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue in Cumbria on the M6. The northbound carriageway of the motorway remains closed from junction 36 to 39 between the Kirby Lonsdale turnoff and the exit for Shap. Investigation works underway following a serious accident in the roadworks, so an air ambulance remains on scene. Now, on the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 heading anti-clockwise, the inside lane's closed off just after the A10 where a car's broken down, long queues back through the Homestead Tunnel, back into Essex through the roadworks towards Waltham Abbey, junction 26. And in East London, the A124, the Barking Road at Plaistow, closed for accident investigation work. Long queues on the M27 eastbound in Hampshire continue from junction 5 to 7 just after the Southampton Airport turn-off. A lorry's broken down. And ferries are suspended in Cornwall between St Mawes and Falmouth due to the bad weather. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We love making our audience big cash winners, and you really could be next with £36,000 tax-free cash in your bank. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good evening to you. I'm Martin Daubney, covering for the big man, Nigel Farage, on Farage Tonight. Has Rachel Reeves done the political equivalent of crossing her fingers behind her back when she ruled out taxes on working people? Well, it has now emerged the Labour plan to increase national insurance for the businesses that so willingly backed them. All the while, Labour willingly spent your taxes on Taylor Swift's private security. And the Health Secretary has told the public that fat people are holding back the economy. Labour's solution is to put everyone on weight loss drugs and haul them back to work. But will this sticking plaster cost the NHS more than what it is expected to return? I'll speak to a doctor who warns that its dangerous side effects could actually put more pressure on health services. And today marks 3 years since the death of Sir David Amos, who was brutally stabbed 20 times by an Islamist terrorist. 3 years on, and have we clearly learnt nothing? Because yesterday, an illegal migrant threatened to kill Nigel Farage.
Englishman, Nigel Pasa, don't talk about me.
This creature with a Kalashnikov gun tattooed on his face could be in Britain by tomorrow. Some people say he might already be here. All that to come, but first, here's your news headlines with Lewis Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Martin. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie here in the GB newsroom. Well, as you've just been hearing, the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary have said new weight loss jabs could help boost the British economy by getting people back to work. Wes Streeting suggested the latest medicines could be life-changing for individuals and would ease pressure on the NHS. But experts are insisting that the drug is not a quick fix, nor a replacement for eating well and exercising, and should only be offered under medical supervision. A court has been told Sarah Sharif had to wear a hijab to hide her facial injuries she received in the lead-up to her death. The 10-year-old was beaten with objects, burnt with an iron and bitten in the week before her death. Her body was found in an upstairs bedroom at her home in Surrey on the 10th of August last year, after her father, Irfan Sharif, called the police and confessed to the killing after he fled to Pakistan. The minicab driver is on trial with Sarah's stepmother and uncle after they denied the murder and allowing the death of a child. The police officer who shot Chris Cabba has told the Old Bailey he did not intend to kill him when he opened fire. Martin Blake told jurors that he intended only to stop the car Cabba was driving and aimed for the centre of his body. Mr. Cabba was shot in the head while driving in south-east London back in September of 2022. He died in the hospital the next day. Mr. Blake, a marksman for the Metropolitan Police, is accused of murder, which he denies. Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been hit with a new batch of lawsuits accusing him of sexual assault against 6 people, including a 16-year-old boy. The lawsuits filed yesterday accused Combs of raping women, sexually assaulting men and molesting the boy. More than 100 alleged victims are now believed to be in the process of taking legal action against Combs in the wake of his sex trafficking arrest last month. And for some breaking news now, it's been reported that Thomas Tuchel has now agreed to become the next England manager. The Times are reporting that the former Bayern Munich manager, who also won the Champions League with Chelsea back in 2021, will succeed Gareth Southgate and become England's first German-born boss. Well, hopefully he can teach us how to win on penalties. Those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Lewis Mackenzie. More from me in an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to the show. Let's get cracking now. If you recall, it was a central pledge of Labour's election campaign: no tax rises on working people. They told us over and over and over again. In case you need a reminder, take a little listen to this.
We will not raise tax on working people. No tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT.
Labour has no plans to increase taxes on working people.
Well, there we go. Sounding like true Daleks. No plans to increase taxation. That seems pretty straightforward, even to me. And yet, this morning, Sir Keir Starmer gave an interview to the BBC where he twice refused to rule out a rise in employers' national insurance contributions in this hugely anticipated budget. Is this a straightforward breach of Labour's manifesto pledge? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former Labour MP, Sir George Howarth. Sir George, welcome to the show. So time and time again, we heard it there. No increases in taxation, and yet that's precisely what's going to happen on October the 30th.
Well, I don't think there was in any doubt during the general election that the pledge made on insurance was that it wouldn't be increased for people who are in work. And so I don't think there was any commitment that it wouldn't be increased to employers. So I think, to be honest, it's a bit of a fuss about nothing. And certainly I don't think it is a break with the manifesto pledge. Also, we don't even know whether it's going to happen yet.
OK, but it's much fuss about nothing, you would say. But we've got a clip where Rachel Reeves actually, in 2021, blasted the Conservative Party for proposing to rise national insurance on employers. Let's take a little gander.
Despite all of their election promises to cut national insurance contributions, they're actually raising them against the strong advice of business and trades unions. The Conservative government's actions will make each new recruit more expensive and increase the costs to business. The decision to saddle employers and workers with the jobs tax takes money out of people's pockets when our economic recovery is not yet established or secure, and only adds to the pressure on businesses.
So there we go, Sir George. Different era, different hairstyle, different policy. Quite clearly there. Rachel Reeves saying this is a jobs tax. It will take money out of the pockets of working people because employers will have to pay more, they'll be able to pay employees less, and they will pass those costs on. This is a tax on working people.
I'm sure if you trawl through everything every front bench spokesman said in 2022, you would find there was quite a difference between what was said then and what was in the manifesto.
It's the same person with two different positions, Sir George. It's the same person with two diametrically opposed positions and a policy they're about to introduce in 2 weeks' time.
I'm not denying it, but what I'm saying is what they should be judged on and what they should rightly say, is the important thing, is what was said in the manifesto. And what was said in the manifesto and repeatedly during the campaign, that there would be no national insurance rises for working people, and that's what's happened. Well, that's what we think might happen anyway.
And what we're about to look at, I mean, the figures change by the day, Sir George. It was a £22 billion black hole. We found out yesterday the taxation could be £25 billion. The FT has just done some arithmetic saying it actually totals £40 billion if you include cuts, for example, to the public services as well as the taxation rises. It's going to take us into the stratospheric levels of post-World War II. The Conservatives had the highest rates of tax since World War II. Seems the Labour Party are about to blow that off the scale.
I mean, that is speculation at this stage, and you'll have to be able to judge it on the basis of what's in the budget statement, which is not too far off now. But there's no denying the fact that the economy has been left in particularly in terms of public spending, has been left in a complete mess by the previous government, and this government has to do something about it. So, everything would be great if it was the way we'd like it to be, but it isn't the way we'd like it to be.
I'd hate to assume your age, Sir George, and forgive me for doing so, but you're probably of a certain vintage. You remember the 1970s. You remember the top rate of tax. You remember that all the millionaires and all the entrepreneurs and all the best brains in Britain cleared off under a Labour government because they were squeezed so hard till the pips leaked out. They went abroad. Precisely the same thing is happening as we speak. Yesterday, the Labour Party wooing the world's richest people, although, of course, Elon Musk didn't bother to show up. He fell out with Sir Keir Starmer on Twitter. Is it really sending out the message that Britain is a place that's welcoming to the richest when all you plan to do is tax the pips out of them?
Well, you're quite right to say you were polite enough not to mention my actual age, but certainly I was around in the 1970s. I wasn't a member of Parliament then, but I was a political activist. But the circumstances now are entirely different to the circumstances then. I hope that the level of taxation, particularly on capital gains tax, is a moderate, if there is an increase there, it's a moderate one, because we don't want to drive away investment. And I hope that taxation levels aren't sufficient to drive away the talent that was driven away. I can freely concede that in the 1970s. But as I say, we're sitting here this evening speculating on what might happen. We'll find out very shortly whether all of this is speculation or whether it's actually based on anything.
OK, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for joining us, former Labour MP Sir George Howarth. Perhaps we are going back to the 1970s. Today, earlier, we talked about potential threats of blackouts, as well as the wealthiest fleeing our shores. And, of course, the trains being nationalised. Now, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is my panel, my superb panel. The former head of communications for Reform UK, Gawain Towler, and the journalist and the former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Joe, Gawain, welcome to the show. Let's start with you, Gawain. OK. So we've got this we've got this budget coming forward. Nobody seems to be looking forward to it. Everybody is assuming the brace position. We heard today mortgage rates are going up because the banks are getting spooked. Record amounts of millionaires fleeing the country. But I want to focus on the fact the Labour Party seems to have had more positions on tax than the Kama Sutra, and particularly doing volte-farces on the same policies. The winter fuel allowance, they said in 2017, would kill 4,000 pensioners. Then they brought it in when they got in power. As we just saw, 2021, Rachel Reeves said it's a jobs tax to increase national insurance on employers, and now they're bringing it in. They just seem to have so many U-turns on taxation already.
I think the first point is government is hard. And I think they're waking up to that very, very fast. Yeah. Government is difficult. Opposition, in comparison, is easy. And so they are waking up to a whole series of situations. The 22 billion black hole, as I understand, nobody's actually found it. It's a very big hole for them not to find, but nobody's actually found this 22 billion black hole. But it's a very useful thing to explain everything else. We've got this 22 billion black hole. We have to raise taxes. We have to do this, capital gains tax, the national insurance details that we seem to be coming out, and the complete failure of denial on the national insurance, whereas the capital gains tax, there seems to be a level of denial, suggests this one's coming through. What worried me in some ways, more than the fact of it and this comment from the Chancellor a few years back, is the way in which yesterday, when people were chasing, I think Chris Hope chased down, and it was it was there on a manifesto. You weren't clever enough to notice. And it was this strange approach. Is that, it was always there. We were always going to do it, but you didn't spot it. You read our manifesto. It was we just talked about workers. We didn't talk about employers. But of course, in the end, it's the same thing. And what with the workers' rights legislation that's being pushed through, it's almost like a punishment for employing somebody, particularly in a small business that don't have the compliance departments, don't have the vast levels of investment. When it comes to small businesses, it's going to be terrifying. Why? And of course, if you then stop zero-hour contracts and things and that sort of work, I can't see, if you've got a small business, why would you employ somebody? It seems to be you are being told that you have done something awfully wrong.
Joe Phillips, Rachel Reeves told us yesterday that she aims to make Britain the most business-friendly it's ever been, but corporation tax frozen at 25%. That's 6% higher than it was even under the Tories.
The problem that Labour's got, and I think Gawain is right, that up to a point, government is a lot harder than being in opposition. And I think that they have made a terrible mistake. They've made some awful missteps over the last 100 days, not least of all on winter fuel, which came completely out of the blue. And then, even though today it's been announced that the yearly pension will go up by £400, which is more than the cost of the lost fuel allowance, if you like. But that only gets a little bit of coverage. But they've made a terrible mistake by having such a long gap between the election and the budget. And if you look back over previous governments, it's never been longer than 8 weeks. 8 weeks was the longest with George Osborne.
Don't seem ready.
So consequently, but to be fair, I mean, they have discovered that things were worse than they thought.
How long can they keep blaming the Conservatives for all this?
I think
they get a year.
I mean, seriously.
No, Martin, I think we know the money that the Conservatives wasted on HS2, on the failed Rwanda scheme, on dodgy COVID contracts for their mates.
10 billion quid on public sector pay rises, 22 billion pounds on carbon capture, 16 billion pounds on foreign aid, on climate change for overseas. The money's there. The Labour Party want it.
The pay rises have actually sorted out problems that had cost the country an awful lot because the previous government refused to engage with the doctors.
But we've all got to pay for them as mugs.
Well, we're all going to have to pay for better public services, and our public services are creaking. whether that's schools falling down because of, bad concrete, whether it's the health service, whether it's roads full of potholes, whether it's, everybody wants better public services and nobody wants to pay more tax. So, the challenge for any chancellor of any party is to try and get that balance right. We have to wait and see what happens on the 30th.
So you do. And no doubt on Halloween Eve, they'll still be blaming the Tories. What, in 4 years' time? Gawain,
well, no,
Joe...
to be fair, the Tories were blaming Labour for about 10 years.
Exactly.
And the Liam Burns, there's no money left and all the rest of it. So, all governments do this. All governments use a previous government as an excuse for things they're doing, some reason.
And one of the things that business wants, and one of the things that a lot of the people attending yesterday's summit said, we are so glad to have stability.
But there isn't stability.
Well, there is a damn sight more stability than there was with the four prime ministers.
Joe, we have to leave it there. We've got plenty more coming, though, in round two. Thanks to my panel. Up next, Labour's law and disorder continues. 30 paedophiles with the most serious offences are let off. And the government security company failed to tag prisoners after they released thousands of criminals early. And guess what? They even tagged people that were dead. All of that to come.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
3 incredible young people from Essex are planning to become the youngest people ever to row, not sail, row, across the Atlantic Ocean.
It's about for 3,000 miles?
It is.
Give or take.
Almost exactly that, Sam.
The 3 flying fish, so-called, consists of Anna, Dunk, Harry, Alan and Rowan Daly, who are preparing to row that 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. It would be the second largest ocean in the world, and the trio are aiming to do that challenge in support of the Teenage Cancer Trust.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that Anna and Harry from the Flying Fish join us now. Very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I think the two of you are bonkers, but brilliant. Absolutely incredible what you're doing to raise money for Teenage Cancer Trust. Why did you want to do this?
So our third person, Rowan, his friend actually died. So when he was in secondary school, I believe, one of his peers passed away, and Teenage Cancer Trust supported them and their family a lot. So it was definitely the right charity. Yeah, it was.
Absolutely awful. So you wanted to do something to raise money for teenage cancer. Why rowing?
So my dad did it in 2021.
The trip, the Atlantic trip?
Yeah, he rowed it as a pair. Where we live in Essex, they actually build the boats there. So we used to cycle round there past the boatyard, and he got interested and actually did it. He was the first year after COVID. And one night, we all met in the Air Cadets, so one night after Air Cadets, Rowan actually dropped me off home and the boat was outside. We were obviously waiting to get it sold. And I think he was asking some questions, and we stood there at my porch and went, Rowan said, I reckon we could do that. And I was like, yeah, I reckon we could. And then we brought Harry on board, and that's kind of how it all came together.
If people are watching and they want to support you, do you have a
GoFundMe
we've got
page social media platforms at
Right.
The Free Flying Fish. That's Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, and our GoFundMe links in all of the bios on there.
Fantastic.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christie, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for the big man himself. Now, there's been widespread outrage at our criminal justice system after 30 known paedophiles accused of possessing the most severe child abuse images managed to avoid serving prison time. This comes as the government security firm Serco was dressed down by ministers after it was revealed that some offenders, including convicted domestic abusers, had not even been fitted with tags when they came out of nick. Well, joining me now to discuss this is my panel, and I'm still joined in the studio by the former head of communications for Reform UK, Gawain Towler, and the journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Welcome to the show again, both of you. Joe, I'm going to start with you. This is one of those stories that simply beggars belief. Serco, by the way, they're the same lot that are the biggest landlord to the asylum seekers in Britain, creaming off untold millions of taxpayers' money. This story is astonishing. Nobody was tagged when they were let out of jail. Six-figure fine. We don't know how much. Could be 100 grand. Could be just short of $1 million. They're blaming a shortage of tags. The Ministry of Justice is saying the people aren't getting it right. This is another example of bedlam in our prison service.
It is absolutely, and Serco are one of the worst offenders, and they have all sorts of contracts, ranging from refuse collection to school dinners to prison estate and all of that stuff. You know, there are so many of these big companies that have cornered the market over the years with these sort of PFI, private finance initiatives and public-private partnerships, and they are ripping us off. And I'm very pleased to see that the government has called them in and given them a dressing down, because too often you have the sense that there's been a sort of like, oh, don't worry, Martin, we'll sort it out. We can have a talk about it over lunch, and nothing gets done about it. Now, these people who are running these companies actually need to be held responsible. They need to be held to account. There needs to be a much greater protection of whistleblowers who very often...
But what does that punishment look like? I mean, they're paid for by the taxpayer. If they're fined, presumably the taxpayer pays the fine.
Well, no, they should. I mean, that should come out of their profits.
But the profits are generated. But what I'm saying is, they are on the public payroll, and therefore, if they're fined, Gawain,
but the
it's an immaterial fine.
You know, do you then bring it back into the public sector, which would cost even more? I mean, one of the reasons that all of this was done, and previous governments of both Tory and Labour share responsibility for these contracts, but nobody has ever held these people to account, and nobody has gone in and said, hang on a minute, this isn't good enough, you're sacked, you've lost the contract. Which is interesting because yesterday, and you probably talked about it, was the government announced a new contract, a rolling contract for detention centres, asylum processing centres, which has got
a 10-year project.
Well, it's a 5-year with a potential, a rollover.
A 10-year project.
But, you know, are they going to go for Serco? Because the problem is these people have cornered the market. They know how to write.
Is anybody else actually capable of doing it?
Well, they're clearly not capable of doing it.
Oh, this lot. I mean, to point out that thing, astonishing thing, they got a £19.2 million fine because they were tagging people who were either dead, in jail, or who had emigrated. They're obviously invoicing for the dead.
That is fraud. Basic fraud. If you were to bill GB News for expenses and you weren't doing it, and you were billing them for that expenses, you'd be busted. And you lose that job.
Yes, or if you were working in a shop and you know, you were billing for deliveries to customers that didn't
happen.
exist.
It would in fact dead. It is absurd.
And Gawain's right. That is actually fraudulent. It is criminal.
And yet, I think in a similar but different, the post office scandal. What happened to the firm?
Yeah.
Initially, there was, we are going to let them do more contracts.
Because nobody else can do it.
Yes, and you know,
I don't believe that
the most recent one they got under the previous government was some very specialised system to help Northern Ireland cope with post-Brexit customs arrangements.
I dread to think, and going back to this, the Serco business, they are too big to fail, these firms. That is how they've presented themselves. I do not believe it. I believe, actually, if you let the market know that these people will lose your contracts, then other firms may well bubble up that are in a position to do it. But if you always say it doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to get the job, why should any entrepreneur enter the market? Why should another firm try and enter the market when they know it's stitched up against them?
Can I move on to the second story we're talking about here today, and that is 30 paedophiles who have thousands of pictures, the worst type of pictures, simply avoided jail. They've walked free from courts. And, of course, Hugh Edwards was a high-profile recent offender who avoided jail. And there are a lot of accusations, Joe, at the time of two-tiered policing. Oh, you get put in prison for a Facebook post, but you don't get put in prison for having pictures of 13-year-old boys. But the fact of the matter is, actually, Joe, the sentence that Hugh Edwards got was normal for the offence type. And isn't that the problem? We just don't treat these offences seriously enough.
Who are these paedophiles? I'm not asking you to name them, obviously. But so that you're saying that they have been convicted and they haven't been imprisoned?
Correct.
So
non-custodial sentences, and they had the most serious type of pictures, abuse pictures, paedophilic, I don't want to go into detail on TV, serious stuff, and they avoided
If it's
jail.
the most serious stuff, I'm surprised they avoided jail. And it's very difficult without knowing the exact facts of this. I don't know where this story has come from, but presumably they will be on a sex offenders register.
Yeah, but they still have their liberty, and that's the point, is it not? I mean, are we not? I mean, are we turning a blind eye or going soft on this type of criminality? Is the point?
But is it part of the ongoing problem? Prison places, make your judgment call. Who are you going to put in prison? Who are you going to release from prison early? Who are you not going to put into prison for things that historically and the society would think, well, that deserves a custodial sentence. But if you don't have the prison places and you're letting people out knowingly, and I'm sure that somebody in the department was well aware that they didn't have the tags and they weren't, and all the rest of it. You've got the whole system is breaking down from top to bottom, and it's a consistent lack of planning, a consistent lack of forethought over many years.
Yeah, many years.
And that is not just this government. You can't blame this government for the current situation.
No, you absolutely
but in
can't.
a couple of years' time, you will be able to.
Yeah.
But it's not just the last government. This is decades.
But a lot of people get in touch with GB News, a lot of people on social media, a lot of people who write into newspapers do feel that paedophilia isn't taken seriously enough. How can it be the case that you are jailed for a Facebook post about a riot in Southport, but you can have the most vile paedophilic images and simply walk free?
I'm very happy that people were jailed for Facebook posts because they were...
Do they deserve to be in jail more than, say, for example, Hugh Edwards, who had pictures of 13-year-olds?
Hugh Edwards, as far as I understand from the court case and the hearing, he pleaded guilty, and the photograph that actually was the most
So did all these,
offensive...
95% of the people who've been sent to jail over Facebook pages and all the rest of it. They all pleaded guilty.
Yes,
in fact, if they didn't plead guilty, the chances are they wouldn't be in jail.
They were perpetuating...
As the Labour guy...
Yes.
Down in...
Well, they were perpetuating lies and falsehoods, and they were deliberately...
But not all of them.
Yes, they were.
But the point is, Joe,
mayhem.
the British legal system deems their crimes to be more wanting of a prison sentence than paedophiles. That's the point. Surely the point there is that the law is an ass, not fit for purpose. But we've got to quickly move on, because I know both of you are massive football fans.
I am.
Yeah, you are. Good. It's been reported now, breaking news, that Thomas Tuchel has now agreed to become the new England manager. Goodbye to Gareth Wokegate. I'll be certainly very happy about that. The Times has reported a deal has now been agreed with the former Bayern Munich manager. Tuchel will become the third non-British permanent gaffer of the England's men team, but most importantly, the first manager to be born in Germany. Now, what do you think about that? Is it OK for a manager to be coming from Germany to manage the England team, or is that sacrosanct? Thank you very much to my panel. We'll discuss that next. The Health Secretary believes that fat people are holding back the economy, and Labour's solution is to put the country on Ozempic. But will this end up costing the taxpayer much more money?
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rain for many of us during the rest of the night into tomorrow as well. That rain heavy at times, but it will be very mild because we've got air coming from the south at the moment with low pressure to the west, high pressure to the east, and that southerly airflow bringing extensive low cloud across the UK, so a gloomy night to come with outbreaks of increasingly heavy rain moving up from the southwest into parts of Wales, the Midlands, then northern England, southern Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Could be some issues for Northern Ireland overnight as well as parts of Wales and Western England, localised flooding, and by dawn transport disruption is possible because of the heavy nature of the rain. But it will be on and off rain, and it's not going to be heavy everywhere, certainly for the far north of Scotland. That's where we're going to see the finest weather as we start off Wednesday. Caithness, Orkney, some bright spells, mostly dry, but for the rest of Scotland it's overcast, and we've got outbreaks of rain moving north. Some heavy rain around for Cumbria, into the Isle of Man, North Wales, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Turning more showery across the rest of Wales and the southwest of England. And for much of the Midlands and the south of England, although cloudy, it is mostly dry. There will be some sunshine, though, making an appearance for parts of East Anglia, into the southeast, perhaps London. And as a result of that, well, temperatures will do remarkably well for the time of year, up to 20 to 22 Celsius. 15 to 18 further west, but not feeling very pleasant, with a brisk breeze and those outbreaks of rain heavy at times. By Thursday morning, the wettest weather is moving east and north. Clearer skies follow from the west, albeit with some showers for parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and Western England. Brightening up there for the east of the UK later in the day, but we've got relatively fresh air following after the rain, so temperatures will be starting to slip away.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Dorby, standing in for the big man, Nigel Farage. Now, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has admitted that fat people are holding back the economy. Overweight, jobless Brits could be given, free weight loss medicine to help them get back to work. Now, obesity illness costs the NHS an astounding £11 billion every single year, but the government hopes the injections will reduce costs and boost the economy. Well, I'm about to be joined by Dr. Basha Mukherjee, and I'm still with my panel, and that's the former head of comms at Reform UK, Gawain Towler, and the journalist and the former press secretary to Paddy Ashtown, Joe Phillips. I'll start with my panel. Joe, I'll start with you. There are many, many people saying, why on earth should overweight people be rewarded with freebies to get them back into work, free jabs that cost 250 quid? Well, if you want to get them yourself, surely the answer is stop feeding them jabs and just stop feeding them benefits.
There are lots and lots of people who are obese for a variety of reasons, and we know it is costing the country an absolute fortune, not just in terms of, back and neck and leg pain and immobility. It's also diabetes and heart disease and a whole range of issues that may prevent somebody from working or living their life to the full, whether that's exercising or doing stuff with their kids or whatever it is. I've got doubts about a drug because, there is no quick fix. And although it might help you, it's not going to help you if you carry on eating rubbish. And there is real issues about food poverty in this country. And I don't necessarily mean about people not being able to afford food. It's about access to fresh fruit and vegetables, access to good quality food.
And that's not the case here. This is too much access to food. Let me bring in Dr. Basha Mukherjee at this point, if I could. You work on the front line. You're a GP, right? Is this the answer? It seems to me like we're throwing money at people who simply make bad lifestyle choices.
This is absolutely not the answer, in my opinion. We know that Ozempic and some of these weight loss drugs, they have their own problems, You're introducing essentially side effects into the mix of an already whole range of health problems that some of these people have. But more so, we have to think about the fact that this current proposed idea is only for 5 years. It's a 5-year trial. They're not, thinking about the long-term effects of this drug, and also the fact that once you take these drugs off, if they have not got the right health education, the right financial education to sustain this lifestyle, they're going to go back to square one.
Does the NHS have a problem with mollycoddling the obese? And I'll tell you why I say that. When it comes down to smoking, they just ban smoking outdoors, they tax you to high heaven. If it's boozing, they whack up beer duty, whatever you get much more of the stick, much less of the carrot. When it comes to obesity, they're too afraid to offend fat people, and so they're basically bribing them to do what they should be doing by order.
Yes, and what you've got to understand is that it's not just a case of bribing them. You know, it's also setting the wrong precedent, telling them that actually the only option that's left for you is drugs, medication, and not trying to look at what's causing this obesity epidemic that's happening. And to say that, you know, we have to do this, we have to put this much amount of money in because this is how much money is spent on obesity, and the fact that loads of people with obesity don't work, I don't believe that. I have family members who are obese, who work. There are people who are very, they've got lots of health conditions who work. I think it's an attitude problem, if anything.
Well,
I wholeheartedly agree. The idea that how many thousand people are going to be doing it for 3 years and 50% employed, 50% unemployed, I suspect at the end of the 5 years they'll be much slimmer and they'll still be unemployed, because actually it is not to do with how fat they are. It's not to do with that. It's to do, as you say, with attitude. And frankly, I think they're chasing the wrong thing. I am concerned, as you mentioned, that this is a drug to deal with what is not a medical problem in that sense. And we don't know what the long-term effects are. I am terrified. The amount of times we've had a miracle cure for something and ain't no miracle. And down the line, I believe there's already the movings towards a class action case in America about Ozempic, and to have the government basically providing a medium-term test for the drugs companies seems to be a crazy way about doing it.
Dr. Mukherjee, I was fascinated by that point you just made there. You're implying, I think a lot of people would agree with common sense, that it's not a state of body, it's a state of mind. And if we medicalise, if we make obesity a medical condition that needs to be treated rather than actually just a state of mind that needs to be broken out of, then we're in effect endorsing the continued dependency of obese people on benefits. We don't actually move forward. We're like saying, yes, this is a medical condition, here's your medicine, and therefore it's not your fault, it's a disease. And I think that's a problem. It should be about lifestyle choices and making better ones. But how do we encourage people to do that? We're scared of saying boo to a goose when it comes to obesity.
It's difficult because at the moment we've got an Ozempic, Wegovy shortage, and that's exactly what we're having to do with a lot of the patients that come in to see me in the GP. I have to tell them, I'm sorry, I don't think it's a good idea for you to pay £60 per injection or pay this much money when you haven't got the funds. Let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about what you can do about your current lifestyle. Let's talk about diet. Unfortunately, 10-minute appointments are just not good enough to do that, to address this. So my personal viewpoint would be I would love to have longer with my patients to have those conversations, to get to know what's really driving their food addiction, what's really driving.
Do you think they'll listen?
You'd be surprised. Okay. You'd be surprised. A lot of people, I mean, you know, obesity, you know, as much as it is a state of mind, it is a multi-morbid condition. People with obesity, they struggle with mobility, they struggle with joint pains, they struggle with sleep, so many different problems. You know, they struggle with unable to breathe during the night time, they snore, so they end up having really poor sleep. So we know that there's a multifactorial problem here. And absolutely, when a doctor does give them the time, there are loads of people who are willing to take that on board. But we have to have the time to do that.
Why should the state pay for that? Why should taxpayers like you or I, who aren't obese, you know, have to fork out all these endless, it'd be millions and millions of pounds?
Well, Martin, because we're paying for it anyway. Yeah. We're paying for diabetes. We're paying for... I mean, I just wanted to ask Dr Mukherjee, the thing that I find most upsetting is when you see overweight children, little children, and you see them, you know, with mums and dads and grannies and what have you in the supermarket, and you see a trolley full of absolute rubbish, and you want to scream at them and say, please, Can't you see what's happening? And there is this... I think, you know...
But you can't criticise anybody. We've created a society where any idea of shame is forbidden. You were talking about... We are basically saying to these people, it's not your fault. Well, actually, now I know that there are some conditions that create obesity. There are.
But it is
the vast majority, I say
of
vast,
so many things.
but the vast majority of those who are vast are, in fact, responsible for their own health, their own lifestyle and their own decisions. But they are responsible for them.
I think we've got to move away from the conversation about blame and talk about accountability.
Yes.
I know that, I mean, obesity, diabetes runs in my family. I know how difficult it is once you're addicted to food and certain types of food. It's really difficult to come out of that. However, where the government is ready to essentially fund these companies, Ozempic is essentially a company that's, you know, if they're willing to pay them this money, I think the government does have power, therefore, to control the supermarkets and how the advertising is done, how and where the food is kept. You know, let's talk about the fact that those are these, you know, the argument is that we're trying to get these people back to work. So guessing that probably on some kind of benefit at the moment. Bring back food stamps. Bring back food stamps that allow you to buy healthy food.
What would happen if you tried to do that?
OK, we have to leave it there. Dr Basha Mukherjee and, of course, Joe and Gawain. And it's a great point. Food for thought. £280 million worth of investment was announced by Eli Lilly yesterday. And guess what? They happen to manufacture the drug in question. Big Pharma, once again, are they pulling the strings? That's one for you to think about over the break, because 3 years on from the brutal murder of the Member of Parliament, Sir David Amos, by an Islamist terrorist, Nigel Farage has now had his life threatened by an illegal immigrant trying to get into the UK. Next up, we're speaking to a former Tory MP who narrowly avoided the same fate as Sir David just a month before his murder. What, if anything, has been learned about how to keep our MPs safe? That's coming next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for the Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that, you know, touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in, you know, a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, you know, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling, or are still battling, cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And William heard about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take. She has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake, you know, people like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is this 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday, said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for Nigel. Now, today marks 3 years to the day since Sir David Amess, MP for Southend, was brutally murdered by an Islamist terrorist and left the nation reeling. Earlier today, long-time friends, councillors and MPs gathered to pay their respects to Sir David Amess at a memorial service, as you can see on your screen. His murder highlighted the very real threat our elected representatives face when serving our communities, which is why I was so shocked and angry yesterday to see an illegal migrant making threats against Nigel Farage MP.
Englishman, Nigel Passa, don't talk about me. You not know me. I come to England because I want marriage with your sister. Don't talk about me more. I gonna come to England. I gonna mother.
Well, what, if anything, has been learned about how to keep our MPs safe? And joining me to discuss this now is the former Conservative MP Mike Freer, who narrowly avoided an encounter with Sir David's killer a month before his murder. Mike, thank you very much for joining us on the show. May we start with your recollections of Sir David Amess, who, of course, was a colleague and friend?
David was a remarkable man. I mean, we didn't particularly mix in the same circles. We were probably on different wings of the party, but we shared some very similar views, particularly on the Middle East. But David was almost unique in terms of being somewhat of quite a traditional MP, and he took his constituency enormously to heart. And he was Mr. Southend, and he was unfailingly a gentleman. No one has a bad word to say about him. Even those who may have sparred with him over the years still regarded him as a most wonderful gentleman and an amazing parliamentarian. And I think that's why the Commons felt his murder particularly sharply, is because he was such a genuinely nice man who loved his job and was the epitome of what a constituency member of Parliament should be.
And Mike, particularly post-October the 7th last year, we saw an escalation of hostilities on British streets. We saw Parliament itself barricaded from outside. We saw votes being influenced. And, of course, then that led in that period to your own office being firebombed, which led you to stand down ahead of the general election. Would you care to share with us about how that very, very difficult circumstance led you to make that huge decision to stand down?
Well, there comes, I mean, every MP, even today, the MPs are still talking about the low level of abuse that is just part and parcel of the job. But increasingly, what we're finding with social media, and we're finding with, obviously, people being radicalised online, is the level of abuse is becoming more threatening. And I've never known members of Parliament feel that the need to, if you like, take unusual precautions to keep themselves safe. We all have to be aware of what's around us. But the number of MPs who are worried that their homes aren't safe, that their families aren't safe, their offices aren't safe, changing their behaviour. You know, the accessibility to a British Member of Parliament is quite unique. The fact that we actually, have our surgeries in the middle of our constituencies, we stand in our supermarkets, that is very special. And that is being changed slowly as people have to start taking precautions. And I do think that there's a couple of things we need to address. One is the role of social media and how they largely are unresponsive to complaints when the online content can lead people to become radicalised. And the second thing we need to address is the fact that we have people who are not signing up to our British way of life. I have nobody, I have no problem with anybody wanting to have a good old row with me about my views, but I expect those exchanges of opinion to be respectful. I don't expect people to come to stab me to death or try and set fire to my office if we disagree. And that's something we have to tread carefully on. We don't want to demonise whole sections of the community, but it is a growing problem where we have people who are simply not signing up to our way of life, and that has to be addressed.
And Mike, when you see the video we just showed there of an illegal migrant attempting to get to Britain, issuing a chilling death threat to Nigel Farage, an AK-47 tattooed on his face, do you think we've gone any way forwards on this debate since the tragic murder of Sir David Amess, or do you think actually the threat is as high, if not higher, than it's ever been to our parliamentarians?
I certainly don't have any evidence that the level of threat has reduced. And certainly the man in the film should be identified, found and removed and have no chance of coming to, if any, Western-style democracy, because clearly if he's threatening Nigel Farage, he'll threaten any democratically elected representative, irrespective of the country he's in, and so needs to be swiftly returned from whence he came. People who are genuinely fleeing persecution need to be assessed properly, but those who are simply wanting to come and impose a style of a lifestyle which is not a British way of lifestyle, not our democratic system, have no right to seek asylum. If you want to live in that kind of society, then you don't come to the UK. You know, we are an open and welcoming and tolerant nation, but there are rules. And those rules are that you sign up to our British way of life. And that is something that we need to tread carefully on. I say I don't want to demonise whole communities, but we do have a problem where people are seeking to simply impose their own lifestyle and say, I want to live in Britain, but I want to live my way. No, if you want to live in Britain, you live the British way.
Mike Freer, here to that. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on the sad passing of David Amess. And I'm joined in the panel, my studio, beg your pardon, still by my panel, and that's Gawain Towler and Joe Phillips. But I'm also joined by Jacob Rees-Mogg. State of the Nation, of course, is next. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to turn to you first, Jacob. Of course, David Amess was a colleague and friend of yours. Could I share your thoughts on his the third anniversary of his killing?
When somebody dies, everyone says, what a wonderful man. With David, this was true. He never had an unpleasant word to say about anybody. I got on with him very well because I was on his wing of the party, and David was also very Catholic. His faith was tremendously important to him. He stood up and fought for his constituents. He managed to get Southend made a city. I think the one thing, though, is we should remember David was very, very open to his constituents, who he adored. And it would be tragic if the response to David's death is that MPs hide themselves away. I think it's very important that we maintain that Mike was talking about, that unique openness that we've got in this country, that politicians and the people are one, rather than politicians being a separate caste. And I hope in memory of David we will maintain that whilst recognising that there are tragic risks.
Beautifully put. Now, I've got a quick 20 seconds to talk about what's on your show. Of course, that's coming next.
What I'm going to be talking about is that we can stop climate change by apparently putting things in the sky that cool us down, like volcanoes. So instead of stopping us doing things and freezing us and making us poor, we can actually mitigate through science. It's very exciting.
Great stuff. Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation next. Thank you to Joe Phillips and thank you to Gawain Towler. Sorry I didn't have time for you at the end of the show. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6. First, here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rain for many of us during the rest of the night into tomorrow as well. That rain heavy at times, but it will be very mild because we've got air coming from the south at the moment with low pressure to the west, high pressure to the east, and that southerly airflow bringing extensive low cloud across the UK, so a gloomy night to come with outbreaks of increasingly heavy rain moving up from the southwest into parts of Wales, the Midlands, then northern England, southern Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Could be some issues for Northern Ireland overnight as well as parts of Wales and Western England, localised flooding, and by dawn transport disruption is possible because of the heavy nature of the rain. But it will be on and off rain and it's not going to be heavy everywhere, certainly for the far north of Scotland. That's where we're going to see the finest weather as we start off Wednesday. Caithness, Orkney, some bright spells, mostly dry, but for the rest of Scotland it's overcast and we've got outbreaks of rain moving north. Some Some heavy rain around for Cumbria, into the Isle of Man, North Wales, as well as parts of Northern Ireland.